Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. So this will be a bit of a shorter analysis because I really just want to get through one big idea which I have throughout this chapter, and it's the idea of hierarchical error or a failing in the hierarchy. So what I mean by this mainly is the idea of someone trying to ascend in the hierarchy, and that ascension through the hierarchy bringing along more negatives than it brings along positives. A good example of this would be, as I said earlier, Japanese work culture. So one thing which is happening in Japan and in China to an extent is the idea of this is a Chinese example specifically. It's the idea of involution, where people feel that they are climbing up and up and up in a never-ending rat race, but the end isn't desirable. However, the process is seen as being hyper desirable, but the end is rarely, if ever, contemplated. And when it's contemplated, it's seen as being negative. People don't really talk about it as much. The work regime is just something you have to do, and so because of this brings with it the idea of bailan or taiping, which is the idea of lying flat or the idea of letting it rot. And these people say stuff like, why should I work? When you work hard you can fail, but if you never work hard you'll always be comfortable. These sorts of ideas are endemic and brought about by malformed hierarchy, right? And these sorts of people, they will try and escape said hierarchy or by finding another hierarchy. So whenever we think about hierarchies, we have to take into account how if you're at the top you can no longer ascend, and the joy which is derived from being in hierarchies is the idea of ascending through the hierarchy. However, hierarchies can be malformed, where ascent, as I said before, leads to negativity. And hierarchies can also be, you can also sit atop a hierarchy and then not be able to move up, and this can cause within it feelings of depression, which happens quite often. For example, the powerlifter Eddie Hall felt extreme sadness after completing his 500 kg deadlift, because he was just a normal guy. Again, that exhilaration, that rush of being the best in the world was caveated by him going back to his normal life, his everyday life, going to his son's birthday party and just being like another dad there, right? And this is kind of the contrast which happens in whenever we achieve something which is great, whenever we see ourselves to be the victor, to be the winner, to have ascended the hierarchy, to sit atop the hierarchy. And something which I said earlier on, quite a bit earlier on in the book, hierarchy ascension without further ascension will always lead to apathy, and ascension followed by descension will lead to despair, right? So in Eddie Hall's case, it was ascension followed by descension, or you could say ascension followed by not followed by further ascension. So it led to despair, and then despair led to apathy, and then he found something else to work on. He found another hierarchy in which to engage in, which was YouTube, I believe, but it might have been something else, I'm not too sure. He did series for the History Channel, so maybe it was that right after, so maybe not right after, but he had other avenues, other hierarchies to climb. So that's an example of how seeing atop the hierarchy can be a negative thing, because you can't ascend anymore. Hierarchy is supposed to be ascend. As long as you're ascending, it's positive, right? And then for the people who can't ascend, the Taiping sort of people, the Bailan sort of people, they also feel the same negativity because they cannot ascend anymore. Similarly to Eddie Hall, even though Eddie Hall was at the top, they cannot ascend when they're at the bottom because of whatever reasons, whatever means might be at play keeping them down there, right? And so in that way, these two people are fairly similar in the despair which they get from the existence of hierarchies.